The morning of September 15th started like any other Tuesday for Sarah Mitchell. As a lead architect at Morrison & Associates, she had arrived early at the Grandview Towers construction site to conduct the final safety inspection. The 12-story residential building was scheduled to open in just 2 weeks, and Sarah took pride in ensuring every detail met code. She was on the 8th floor, reviewing structural support beams, when the world exploded around her. The sound came first, a groaning metallic shriek that seemed to emerge from the building's very bones. Then the floor beneath her feet began to shift, and Sarah's architect-trained mind immediately understood what was happening. Catastrophic structural failure. "Everyone out! Now!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the thunderous roar of concrete and steel surrendering to gravity. The building folded in on itself like a house of cards, and Sarah found herself trapped beneath a maze of twisted metal and concrete chunks. Her left leg was pinned, and she could taste blood and dust in her mouth. But she was alive, and she was conscious. That's when she heard his voice. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is Captain Morrison with Station 19. "Here," Sarah called out, her voice hoarse but strong. "I'm here, 8th floor, northeast corner." "I hear you." The voice was getting closer, accompanied by the sounds of debris being moved. "What's your name?" Sarah Mitchell. I'm trapped, but I'm okay." "Sarah, I'm Jake. I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay calm and talk to me. Can you do that?" There was something about his voice, steady, warm, completely confident, that made Sarah's panic begin to subside. "Yes, I can do that." "Good girl. Sarah, I need you to tell me if you're hurt." "My leg is pinned, and I think I hit my head, but I can think clearly." "That's exactly what I need to hear." "Sarah, I'm going to be moving some heavy debris to reach you. It might make some noise, but I want you to keep talking to me, okay? Tell me about yourself." As the sounds of rescue work continued above her, Sarah found herself talking to this stranger who was risking his life to save hers. "I'm an architect. I was doing the final safety inspection when this happened." "An architect? That's impressive. What made you choose that field?" "My dad was a construction worker. He always said buildings should be safe places where families can feel secure. I wanted to make sure they were." "Your dad sounds like a smart man." "Sarah, I can see you now. I'm about 10 feet above you." Sarah looked up through the gap in the debris and saw a helmet light. For the first time since the collapse, she felt truly hopeful. "I see your light." "And I can see your beautiful face. We're going to get you out of here, Sarah. I promise." For the next 3 hours, Jake worked methodically to clear the debris around Sarah. Other rescue workers had arrived, but Jake never left his post above her. He kept her talking, kept her calm, kept her focused on anything except the tons of unstable concrete and steel surrounding them. "Jake," Sarah said during a brief pause in the rescue work, "are you married?" She heard him chuckle. "That's a pretty direct question for someone I haven't even properly met yet." "Well, when someone's risking their life to save yours, I think normal social rules don't apply." "Fair point. No, I'm not married. Never found the right person, I guess. What about you?" "No. My ex said I cared more about building safety codes than building a relationship." Sounds like he didn't deserve you. The way he said it, simple and sincere, made Sarah's heart skip a beat. This was insane. She was trapped in a building collapse, possibly seriously injured, talking to a man she'd never seen, and she was developing feelings for him. "Sarah, we're almost ready to get you out. I need you to stay very still while we stabilize the beam above you." "Jake?" "Yeah? Thank you for staying with me, for not leaving." "Sarah, I want you to know something. In 15 years of doing this job, I've never met anyone as brave as you. You've been trapped for 3 hours, and you haven't complained once. You haven't panicked. You've just kept talking and trusting me to get you out." "I trust you completely." "Good, because I'm coming down to get you myself." 20 minutes later, Jake squeezed through the gap in the debris, and Sarah saw his face for the first time, even covered in dust and sweat, even seen through the haze of her own shock and exhaustion. He was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. Dark hair beneath his helmet, intense blue eyes, and a smile that made her feel safer than any building ever could. "Hi, Sarah," he said softly. reaching out to touch her face gently. "I'm Jake Morrison." "Hi, Jake," she whispered back. As he worked to free her leg and prepare her for extraction, Sarah felt herself getting dizzy. "Jake, I don't feel so good." "Hey, stay with me, Sarah, look at me." She tried to focus on his face, but everything was getting blurry. "I'm sorry, I think I'm—" "Sarah, stay awake." But the darkness was pulling her under, and the last thing she remembered was Jake's voice calling her name with an urgency that sounded like more than professional concern. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? I'm reading every single comment. The first thing Sarah became aware of was the steady beeping of machines. The second thing was the antiseptic smell that meant hospital. The third thing was a warm hand holding hers. She opened her eyes slowly, and the face she saw first was Jake's. He was sitting in a chair beside her bed, still in his firefighter uniform, though it was clean now. His blue eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, but when he saw her looking at him, his face lit up with relief. "Hey there," he said softly. "You stayed," Sarah whispered, her throat dry. "I told you I wouldn't leave." "How long?" 3 days. You had some swelling in your brain from the head injury. The doctors kept you sedated while it went down." Sarah tried to sit up, but Jake gently pressed her back against the pillows. "Easy. You're going to be okay, but you need to take it slow." "The building collapse. How many people?" Jake's expression grew serious. 12 people were in the building when it collapsed. We got everyone out alive, but 8 people were injured. You were the most seriously hurt. "What caused it?" "That's still under investigation." Something in his tone made Sarah study his face more carefully. "Jake, what aren't you telling me?" Before he could answer, a nurse entered the room. "Miss Mitchell, it's so good to see you awake. Captain Morrison here has barely left your side." "I was just keeping an eye on her," Jake said, but Sarah noticed he avoided her gaze. "Captain Morrison," the nurse continued with a knowing smile, "has been here every day, reading to you, talking to you about his cases, bringing you flowers. The whole nursing staff thinks it's the most romantic thing we've ever seen." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. "You did all that?" Jake looked embarrassed. "The doctor said that familiar voices could help with recovery." "Uh-huh," the nurse said with obvious skepticism. "And I suppose that's why you've been sleeping in that chair instead of going home?" "I wanted to be here when she woke up." After the nurse left, Sarah and Jake sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Jake, why do I get the feeling there's something about the building collapse that you're not telling me?" Jake stood up and walked to the window. "Sarah, you're an architect. When a building that new collapses like that, what would you suspect?" "Structural failure. Either poor construction or—" Sarah paused as the implications hit her. "Or faulty safety inspections. The preliminary investigation found some irregularities in the inspection reports." "What kind of irregularities?" Jake turned back to her, conflict clear in his expression. "Sarah, I think you should focus on getting better right now. This other stuff can wait." "No, it can't. 8 people were hurt, and I was doing the final inspection. If there was something wrong with that building, I need to know." Jake came back to her bedside and sat down. "The inspection reports show that structural issues were identified and corrected, but the physical evidence suggests those corrections were never actually made." Sarah felt sick. "Someone falsified the inspection reports." "That's what it looks like." "Jake, this is huge. If someone is falsifying safety inspections, there could be other buildings at risk. We have to report this." "Sarah," Jake took her hand again, "there's something else you should know. The Grandview Towers project was inspected by the city fire department, my department." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Someone in your department signed off on a building they knew was unsafe." "I don't know who yet, but yeah, that's what it looks like." Sarah squeezed his hand. "We have to find out who did this." "We?" "Jake, you saved my life. Those other victims, they deserve justice. And if there are other unsafe buildings out there, we have to stop this before someone gets killed." Jake studied her face, and Sarah could see him making a decision. "There's something I haven't told you," he said finally. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Over the next week, As Sarah grew stronger and was moved from intensive care to a regular room, Jake visited every day. What started as welfare checks gradually became something more. Collaborative investigation sessions where they pored over building records, inspection reports, and safety codes. Sarah had always been methodical in her work, but Jake brought a different perspective. As a firefighter, he understood building safety from the emergency response side. Which structures were most likely to trap people, which materials became deadly in fires, which shortcuts led to catastrophic failures. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to her laptop screen. Jake had brought her computer from her apartment, along with access to the city's building database. The Grandview Towers inspection was signed off by Fire Chief Robert Hayes. Jake's expression darkened. "That's my boss. Jake, look at the pattern." Sarah had spent the morning pulling records. In the last 2 years, Chief Hayes has personally signed off on inspections for 12 major construction projects. Every single one of them had initial safety violations that were supposedly corrected. That's not unusual. The chief often handles high-profile projects. But look at this. Sarah pulled up another screen. "I checked with my contacts at other architectural firms. 5 of these 12 buildings have had significant safety issues after opening. Emergency evacuations, structural problems, fire suppression failures." Jake stared at the screen. "Sarah, what are you saying?" "I'm saying your chief might be taking bribes to approve unsafe buildings." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah could see Jake wrestling with the implications. "Jake, there's something else. I've been thinking about what you said, that this isn't the first time something like this has happened." Jake got up and closed the door to Sarah's hospital room. When he came back, his face was grim. 10 years ago, my father was a firefighter with Station 19, Lieutenant Thomas Morrison." "Morrison, like your last name?" "Yeah, he died in the line of duty, officially." "What do you mean, officially?" Jake sat down heavily. "There was a warehouse fire. Old building, supposedly up to code. My dad went in to rescue a homeless man who was reportedly trapped inside. The building collapsed, and both my dad and the homeless man died." "I'm so sorry, Jake." "The thing is, Sarah, there was no homeless man. The call was fake, and the building had the same kind of safety inspection irregularities we're seeing now." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "You think your father was murdered?" "I think my father found out about the same corruption we're uncovering now, and someone wanted him silenced." "Jake, that means Chief Hayes has been doing this for at least 10 years. It means Chief Hayes might have killed my father." Sarah reached for Jake's hand. "We have to expose him." "Sarah, if I'm right about what happened to my dad, then Hayes is dangerous, really dangerous. Then we have to be smart about how we do this." Jake looked at her with an expression of amazement. "You realize what you're saying? You're talking about going up against the fire chief of a major city, a man who might be a murderer." "Jake, I'm an architect. My job is to make sure buildings are safe, that families can sleep soundly knowing their homes won't collapse on them. If Hayes is taking bribes to approve unsafe buildings, he's not just stealing money, he's risking lives. We can't let him keep doing this." "And I'm a firefighter," Jake said quietly. "My job is to save people. If my own chief is creating the situations I'm supposed to rescue people from, then we stop him." Jake studied Sarah's face, and she could see the moment he made his decision. "Okay, but we do this carefully. And Sarah?" "Yeah? If things get dangerous, you back out. I won't have you getting hurt because of this." "Jake Morrison, I was trapped under a collapsed building for 3 hours, and I didn't panic. I think I can handle a corrupt fire chief." Jake smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him since they'd started uncovering the corruption. "You know what, Sarah Mitchell? I think I'm falling in love with you." "You think?" "Okay, I know I'm falling in love with you." Sarah felt her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with her medical condition. "Good, because I fell in love with you while you were digging me out of that building." Jake leaned down and kissed her gently. It was their first kiss, and it tasted like hope and promises, and the kind of love that's worth fighting for. When they broke apart, Sarah smiled. "Now, let's go catch a corrupt fire chief." But as Jake kissed her again, neither of them noticed the figure in scrubs who had been listening outside Sarah's door and was now walking quickly toward the hospital exit. pulling out a cell phone. "Sarah, you need to see this," Jake said, bursting into her hospital room the next morning with a folder under his arm and concern written across his face. "What is it?" "I got access to my father's case file. Look at this." He spread photos across her bedside table. "This is the warehouse where my dad died." Sarah studied the images. Even with her limited training in fire damage assessment, she could see the problems. "Jake, this building didn't collapse from fire damage." "What do you mean?" "Look at the support beams. The failure points are all wrong for fire damage. This looks like controlled demolition." Jake stared at the photos. "You're saying someone deliberately brought down the building?" "I'm saying someone made sure your father wouldn't survive that fire." Before Jake could respond, his radio crackled to life. "Captain Morrison, report to Chief Hayes' office immediately." Jake and Sarah exchanged glances. "That can't be a coincidence," Sarah said. "I have to go. But Sarah, promise me you won't do anything while I'm gone. Don't make any calls. Don't contact anyone about this investigation." "Jake, I'm stuck in a hospital bed. What could I possibly do?" An hour later, Jake sat across from Fire Chief Robert Hayes in an office that screamed power and authority. Hayes was a large man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of ordering people around. "Jake," Hayes said, leaning back in his leather chair, "I hear you've been spending a lot of time at the hospital with that architect from the Grandview collapse." "Sarah Mitchell is a friend, sir. She was seriously injured." Of course. It's admirable, your dedication to the victims." Hayes paused. "I also hear you've been asking questions about the building inspection records." Jake kept his expression neutral. "I was curious about what caused the collapse, sir, as the captain who led the rescue operation." Curiosity is a good quality in a firefighter, Jake. But sometimes curiosity about the wrong things can be problematic. "I'm not sure I understand, sir." Hayes stood up and walked to the window overlooking the fire station. "Your father was a curious man, too. Always asking questions. Always digging into things that weren't really his concern." Jake felt his pulse quicken. "My father died a hero, sir." "Yes, he did. And it would be tragic if his son made the same mistakes he did." The threat was clear, but Hayes wasn't done. "Jake, you're a good firefighter. You have a bright future ahead of you. Department chief, maybe even fire commissioner someday. But that kind of future requires loyalty. It requires understanding that some questions are better left unasked." "Are you ordering me to stop looking into the Grandview inspection, sir?" Hayes turned back to face him. "I'm advising you, as someone who cares about your well-being, to focus on your job and let the investigators handle the investigation." "And if I don't take that advice?" Hayes' expression grew cold. "Jake, accidents happen in this job. Your father learned that the hard way. I'd hate for you to have to learn the same lesson." Jake stood up. "Are you threatening me, Chief?" "I'm protecting you, son. The same way I tried to protect your father." Unfortunately, he didn't listen. As Jake left Hayes' office, his mind was racing. Hayes had essentially confessed to murdering his father, but Jake had no proof, no recording, no witnesses. But one thing was clear. Hayes knew about their investigation, and he was willing to kill to protect his secret. Jake drove straight back to the hospital, but when he got to Sarah's room, she wasn't there. "Excuse me," he said to a passing nurse. "Where's the patient from room 314? "Oh, Ms. Mitchell. She was taken for surgery about an hour ago." "Surgery? What surgery?" "The neurosurgeon said there was still some pressure on her brain from the original injury. Emergency surgery to relieve it." Jake felt ice in his veins. "Who authorized this surgery?" "I believe it was Chief Hayes from the fire department. He said he was coordinating with Ms. Mitchell's insurance company to ensure she got the best care." Jake ran for the elevator. This was no coincidence. Hayes was making his move. In the surgical waiting area, Jake found Sarah's surgeon, Dr. Jennifer Park. "Doctor, I need to know about Sarah Mitchell's surgery." "Are you family?" "I'm Captain Morrison with the fire department. I was the one who rescued her from the building collapse." Dr. Park looked confused. "Captain, there's no surgery scheduled for Ms. Mitchell today. Her brain swelling resolved days ago. Who told you she was in surgery?" "The nurse said Chief Hayes authorized emergency surgery." "That's impossible. I'm Ms. Mitchell's neurosurgeon, and I would never authorize unnecessary surgery. And no fire chief has the authority to order medical procedures. Jake's blood went cold. "Doctor, where is Sarah Mitchell?" "I have no idea. But Captain, if someone told hospital staff that I authorized surgery and they took Ms. Mitchell somewhere..." Jake was already running toward the hospital security office. Hayes hadn't just threatened him, he'd taken Sarah. And if Jake didn't find her soon, Hayes was going to finish what he'd started with Jake's father. But Jake had one advantage his father hadn't. He knew who the enemy was, and he was going to make sure Hayes paid for every life he'd destroyed. As Jake coordinated with hospital security to review surveillance footage, he made a silent promise to Sarah and to his father's memory. Hayes's reign of corruption and murder was about to end. Even if Jake had to die to stop him. Jake found Sarah in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, tied to a chair, but conscious and angry rather than afraid. She was guarded by two men Jake didn't recognize, probably Hayes's hired muscle. The rescue itself was swift and efficient. Jake had called in his most trusted colleague, Lieutenant Martinez, and together they'd taken down the guards and freed Sarah without firing a shot. But as they drove away from the warehouse, Jake knew their real problems were just beginning. "Hayes is going to claim we attacked his men and kidnapped you," Jake told Sarah as Martinez drove them to a safe house. "We need proof of what he's done before he spins this into something else." "Jake, I got the proof while they had me," Sarah said, holding up a small digital recorder. "Hayes came to gloat. He told me everything, about your father, about the bribes, about the buildings he's approved that he knows are unsafe. It's all on here." "That's great, but it won't matter if we're dead before we can use it." Lieutenant Martinez, a veteran firefighter with 20 years of experience, spoke up from the driver's seat. "Jake, there's something you need to know. Hayes isn't working alone. He's got people in the police department, the mayor's office, even the district attorney's office." "How do you know that?" "Because I've been investigating him for 2 years, ever since the Riverside Elementary fire. That school had the same kind of falsified inspection reports we're seeing now. 23 kids were hospitalized from smoke inhalation because the fire suppression system didn't work." Sarah looked between Jake and Martinez. "How many people have been hurt because of Hayes?" "Too many," Martinez replied. "But taking him down isn't going to be easy. He's got too much power, too many connections." "Then we need to be smarter than he is," Jake said. "Martinez, what would it take to expose Hayes publicly, in a way that his connections couldn't cover up?" "We'd need evidence that couldn't be disputed, presented in a forum where he couldn't control the narrative." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then spoke up. "I have an idea, but Jake, you're not going to like it." "What?" "We fake your death." Jake and Martinez both stared at her. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" "Think about it. Hayes threatened to kill you the same way he killed your father. What if we let him think he succeeded?" "Sarah, that's insane." "Is it? Hayes is planning to kill you anyway. This way we control when and how it happens, and more importantly, we can use your death to draw him out into the open." Martinez was nodding slowly. It could work. If Hayes thinks Jake is dead, he'll get careless. He might even brag about it. But how do we fake a death convincingly enough to fool Hayes? Sarah smiled. Easy. We stage a fire at another one of his unsafe buildings. Jake goes in to rescue someone, the building collapses, and Captain Morrison is tragically killed in the line of duty. And then what? Then we have a very public funeral. A hero's funeral. The kind that attracts media attention. And during the service, when Hayes is giving a speech about what a great firefighter you were, we play the recording of him confessing to murder. Jake looked at Sarah with amazement. "You want to expose Hayes at my own funeral?" "I want to expose Hayes when he least expects it, in front of witnesses he can't intimidate or buy off." Martinez grinned. "Sarah, that's either brilliant or completely crazy." "Probably both," Sarah admitted. "But it's our best shot at taking Hayes down and making sure no one else gets hurt." Jake took Sarah's hand. "There's just one problem with this plan. You're supposed to be in surgery tomorrow for the real procedure to relieve the remaining pressure in your brain. Dr. Park moved it up after Hayes' stunt today." So? "So you'll be unconscious while we're staging my death. You won't wake up until it's all over." Sarah felt her heart sink. She'd been looking forward to finally being healthy enough to really start a life with Jake. Instead, she'd be unconscious while he risked everything to bring down Hayes. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me that when I wake up from surgery, you'll still be alive to hold my hand." Jake kissed her gently. "I promise. When you wake up, this will all be over, and we'll have the rest of our lives ahead of us." But as Jake held Sarah, he silently prayed that it was a promise he'd be able to keep. Because if their plan failed, Sarah would wake up to find that the man she loved really was dead. The next morning, as Sarah was prepared for surgery, Jake gave her one last kiss. "I love you, Sarah Mitchell." "I love you too, Jake Morrison. Don't you dare let Hayes win." "I won't. I'll see you when you wake up." As the anesthesia pulled Sarah under, her last conscious thought was of Jake's promise. She trusted him completely. She just hoped that trust wasn't misplaced. 6 hours later, as Sarah lay unconscious in recovery, Jake was walking into the warehouse fire that would kill him. By the time Sarah woke up, Captain Jake Morrison would be officially dead, and his funeral would be scheduled for that very afternoon. But Sarah didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was darkness and the echo of Jake's promise in her dreams. Sarah woke up in stages. First came the familiar sounds of hospital machines, then the antiseptic smell, then the dull ache in her head that told her the surgery was over. But something was wrong. The light was different. Not the soft morning light she expected, but the harsh fluorescent glare of afternoon. "How long was I out?" she asked the nurse who was checking her vitals. "About 8 hours, honey. The surgery went perfectly. Dr. Park says there shouldn't be any more problems with brain pressure." 8 hours? What time is it?" "It's almost 3 p.m. Sarah tried to sit up, looking around the room frantically. "Where's Jake? Captain Morrison? He said he'd be here when I woke up. He promised me." The nurse's expression changed, becoming careful and heartbreakingly sad. She pulled a chair closer to Sarah's bed and sat down slowly. "Honey, maybe you should talk to Dr. Park about that." "No," Sarah's voice cracked with desperation. "Tell me now, where is Jake?" The nurse took Sarah's hand gently. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. There was an accident this morning. A warehouse fire. Captain Morrison." She paused, struggling with the words. "He didn't make it out." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow to the chest. She couldn't breathe. "What? No, that can't be right." "He died saving people, just like he saved you. The fire department says he's a hero." Sarah's world shattered. The machines around her began beeping frantically as her heart rate spiked. "No, no, no! He promised me! He promised he'd be here when I woke up!" Tears streamed down her face as the full weight of loss crashed over her. When is the funeral?" "It's today, in about 2 hours. Sarah, I'm so sorry." After the nurse left, Sarah lay in her bed sobbing uncontrollably. Her first instinct was pure, overwhelming grief, the kind of pain that felt like it might literally kill her. But as her mind gradually cleared from the anesthesia and the initial shock, something else began to surface through her devastation. Suspicion. 8 hours was too short. Too short for surgery, death notification, investigation, and funeral planning. Most funerals took days to arrange, not hours, and Jake had been planning to fake his death. What if? Sarah forced herself to think like the architect she was, analyzing the situation logically despite her broken heart. If Jake was really dead, the funeral would be delayed while the fire department conducted a thorough investigation. If the funeral was happening today, it was because someone wanted it to happen quickly. Someone like Hayes. But what if Jake's plan had worked? What if this was all part of exposing Hayes? Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. Dangerous, desperate hope that she was afraid to trust. "I need to get to that funeral," she called out, her voice hoarse from crying. The nurse returned. "Sarah, you just had brain surgery. You can't possibly leave the hospital." "Jake Morrison," Jake said, reaching the front of the cathedral and turning to face the packed pews, "is not dead, but Chief Robert Hayes wishes I was." "Then get me a wheelchair and someone to push it. I'm going to that funeral whether you help me or not." Sarah's voice carried a determination that surprised even her. "If Jake is really dead, I need to say goodbye. And if he's not..." She didn't finish the sentence. afraid to voice the hope. An hour later, Sarah was in a wheelchair in the back of a taxi, wearing the black dress that Martinez, Jake's friend, had brought to the hospital. Martinez had been acting strangely, avoiding her eyes, which only fueled her suspicions. He'd also brought her something else, a small device that looked like a hearing aid. "If Jake is alive," Martinez had whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "he'll use this frequency to contact you during the service." The funeral was at St. Mary's Cathedral, and it was packed. The entire fire department was there, along with city officials, media, and hundreds of people whose lives Jake had touched. Sarah positioned her wheelchair in the back, where she could see everything but remain relatively unnoticed. Chief Hayes was at the podium, delivering a eulogy that made Sarah feel physically sick. "Jake Morrison died the way he lived," Hayes was saying, putting the lives of others before his own. "He was the kind of firefighter who ran toward danger, not away from it." Sarah touched the device in her ear, holding her breath. Nothing yet. But she was watching the other firefighters now, and something was wrong. Martinez kept checking his watch. Lieutenant Collins was shifting nervously. Several of the younger firefighters were exchanging glances. They didn't look like men mourning a fallen colleague. They looked like men keeping a secret. "Jake Morrison was like a son to me," Hayes continued, and Sarah wanted to scream at the hypocrisy. "I watched him grow from a rookie firefighter into one of the finest captains this department has ever seen. His father, Thomas Morrison, died serving this city, and Jake followed in his footsteps right to the end." That's when Sarah heard it, a soft crackle in her ear, followed by a voice that made her heart stop. "Sarah, I'm here, I'm alive." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a sob of relief. Jake's voice, alive and real, continued in her ear. "Hayes confessed everything to Martinez this morning, thinking I was dead. We got it all on tape. Are you okay, sweetheart? I know this is torture for you." Sarah closed her eyes, tears of relief streaming down her face. She wanted to scream with joy, but forced herself to remain still. "When I give the signal," Jake's voice continued, "start recording on your phone. This is about to get very interesting." Hayes was still speaking, his voice dripping with false sentiment. "Jake Morrison's sacrifice reminds us that some people are born to serve others, born to make the ultimate sacrifice for—" "That's enough." The voice came from the back of the cathedral, and every head turned. Sarah's heart nearly exploded as she saw Jake Morrison, very much alive, standing in the doorway. He was silhouetted against the afternoon light, wearing his dress uniform, looking like an avenging angel. The gasps from the congregation were audible, but Sarah couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears. She tried to stand from her wheelchair, but her legs gave out from emotion and surgical recovery. Jake began walking down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent cathedral. Sarah could see his face now, determined, angry, but very much alive. Hayes went white as a sheet. "Jake, but how are you?" "Alive?" Jake's voice carried clearly through the cathedral as he continued his slow march toward the altar. "Yes, I'm alive. Very much alive. Sorry to disappoint you, Chief." Sarah was sobbing openly now, not caring who saw her. Jake was alive. He had kept his promise. Jake and Sarah Morrison knew all of this was true. They had lived it, survived it, and built their happiness on the ashes of tragedy. And every day for the rest of their lives, they would remember that love really can conquer anything, even death itself. Hayes tried to recover, his voice shaking. "Jake, what are you doing? Everyone thinks you're dead. This is highly irregular." "You know what's irregular?" Jake interrupted, his voice rising. "A fire chief who takes bribes to approve unsafe buildings. A fire chief who murders firefighters who get too close to the truth." The cathedral erupted in shocked murmurs. Hayes was backing away from the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake continued, "Chief Hayes has been taking bribes to approve unsafe buildings for over 10 years. He's responsible for dozens of injuries, and at least one murder, my father's." "This is insane," Hayes sputtered, looking around desperately for support. "Someone call security. This man is clearly having some kind of breakdown." But Martinez was already standing, along with several other firefighters. "We have recordings, Chief. We have evidence. It's over." Jake pulled out a digital recorder and held it high. This morning, thinking I was dead, Chief Hayes confessed everything to Lieutenant Martinez. Would you like to hear it? Without waiting for an answer, Jake pressed play. Hayes's voice filled the cathedral, clear and damning. Morrison was getting too close to the truth about the inspection bribes. I had to stop him before he destroyed everything I'd built, just like I stopped his father 10 years ago. And now I have to stop you too, Martinez, if you don't keep your mouth shut. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in the massive cathedral. Then the whispers started, growing into a roar of outrage and disbelief. Hayes tried to run, pushing past people in the front pew, but federal agents who had been waiting outside blocked every exit. "Robert Hayes," one of them announced, "you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, bribery, and endangering public safety." As Hayes was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming about frame-ups and conspiracies, Jake turned and looked directly at Sarah. Their eyes met across the packed cathedral, and the rest of the world disappeared. Jake began walking toward her, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. Sarah tried again to get out of her wheelchair, managing to stand on shaking legs before collapsing forward. Jake caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest as she sobbed uncontrollably. "I thought I lost you," she gasped between sobs, beating weakly against his chest. "I thought you were dead." Hey, look at me," Jake said, cupping her face in his hands and tilting it up to meet his eyes. "I'm here. I'm alive. I kept my promise." "You promised you'd be here when I woke up," Sarah accused through her tears. "And I am here. I told you I'd be here, and I am." "Don't you ever do that to me again?" Sarah demanded, still crying but starting to laugh through her tears. "Never," Jake promised solemnly. "Never again. Sarah, I love you more than life itself, and I never want to spend another minute without you." He dropped to one knee right there on the cathedral floor, in front of hundreds of witnesses, still holding her hands. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me? Right now? Today?" Sarah looked around at the packed cathedral, at the altar where a priest stood ready, at the flowers that had been meant for a funeral but could serve for a wedding. "We're at your funeral," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Then let's make it our wedding instead," Jake said with a grin. "I can't think of a better way to celebrate being alive than by promising to spend the rest of my life loving you." "Yes," Sarah said, pulling him up to kiss him. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The cathedral erupted in cheers and applause. The priest, who had been standing in shock, stepped forward with a huge smile. "Well," he said, his voice carrying over the noise, "I've never performed a wedding at a funeral before, but I think this might be the most appropriate one I've ever done. After all, we're celebrating love conquering death itself." As Jake and Sarah stood at the altar where Jake's casket should have been, exchanging vows in front of the same people who had come to mourn him, Sarah realized that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most terrible endings. "I promise to love you in sickness and in health," Jake said, his voice strong and clear, "in building collapses and brain surgeries, through fake deaths and real life, for better or worse, until actual death do us part." "I promise to trust you completely," Sarah replied, "to believe in your promises even when everything seems impossible, to love you with every breath I take, and to never, ever let you plan another fake death." The congregation laughed through their tears as Jake slipped a simple gold band onto Sarah's finger, the same ring he had been planning to give her after Hayes was arrested. "You may kiss your wife," the priest announced with obvious joy. As Jake kissed Sarah, sealing their marriage with the same passion that had sustained them through every trial, the cathedral erupted in celebration. Outside, news crews were already reporting the story of the firefighter who came back from the dead to expose corruption and marry the woman he loved. But inside the cathedral, Jake and Sarah were focused only on each other and the promise they had made: to love, honor, and protect each other for the rest of their lives. "I love you, Mrs. Sarah Morrison," Jake whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Jake Morrison," she whispered back. "And next time you want to propose, let's just do it over dinner like normal people." Jake laughed, lifting her up and spinning her around as the congregation cheered. "Deal." No more fake deaths, no more dramatic proposals. Just us, loving each other for the rest of our lives. And this time, when Jake promised to be there for her, Sarah knew it was a promise he would never break. Because love that can survive a building collapse, brain surgery, corruption, fake death, and a resurrection is the kind of love that lasts forever. 6 months later, Jake was sworn in as fire chief, replacing Hayes, who was serving a 20-year sentence for murder, corruption, and endangering public safety. Sarah had started her own firm specializing in building safety inspections, ensuring that what happened at Grandview Towers would never happen again. Their love story had started with a building collapse and a rescue. It had survived corruption, fake death, and brain surgery. And it would last a lifetime, built on the strongest foundation of all, absolute trust and unconditional love. Sometimes the best love stories begin with the worst circumstances. Sometimes heroes are made not in moments of glory, but in moments of impossible choice. And sometimes the person who saves your life ends up being the person you save in return. If this story gave you all the feels, smash that subscribe button, because I have more impossible love stories that will make you believe in miracles. And tell me in the comments, what did you think of Jake's resurrection scene? Was it everything you hoped for? Your comments make my day.